Okay, so in the last episode we was doing the text box and we did all these features, and today I'm going to move away completely from the properties. I'm actually going to look at the Node.js side of it, which I'm using the game server, so we might as well open that up now. And I am aware that the button doesn't use the rotation value to actually rotate the triangles into the right position, or to transform the mouse into the right position and then check it against the triangle values. But we'll do that another time as well, because so far this is pretty much functioning except for this thing to do with the rotation. But today I want to change all this because this is getting convoluted and it's going to get harder to keep track of it every time. Obviously you could still keep doing this and get rid of and not do the Node.js server, but we're going to do it this way. We're going to do something different, which is we're going to actually make a scene manager and a scene loader, and we're going to do all this core setup as well. That's all going to be taken into account too. So I'm also probably not going to have this window unload doing all this. We'll do it some other way. Okay, so first of all, we need to look in the game. I'm going to have a look at the folder structure, and we're going to think of how in the core we've got to store some. Actually, we're not going to put it in the core. I'm going to make a new system. So game data, and what this is going to store is all our information that we want to write to. So that would be all our custom properties and all our custom UIs and collisions and stuff, things like that we want to add in, that we aren't going to be necessarily part of the core system. And what this is going to do is allow us to later on is we're going to access this with our editor, and we're going to be able to access all the information, and we're going to be able to change it so it can apply to other systems, or make it easier for us to understand how. So the editor will give us a user interface into editing all the information in the background, rather than having to go into all the coding manually as we've been doing using that core. So I'm going to actually make a new object called loader, and this is still on the game side. So yes, I'm going to do it this way with two parentheses. Not parentheses, two brackets. So it declares it as basically a static object, and the loader is we need to do core load. I'm going to set this to a function, and in this function we have to do a request to the server itself, to the game server all the way back. And I should close everything to the left of this just to make it a little easier to follow which file I'm using. So core loader, and we're going to put this in the core. So this is just loader.js. It's going to give us all the JS syntax. It's just going to highlight the syntax for JS rather than just having it pure white. So on this call function we need to go to the main, and we're going to go messaging. Actually, I'm just going to copy this one because it already exists, the post request. And what this is going to ask is for core load. And if, so now we've got to do a lot of things on the back end, and I don't really want to leave it in this state, but I'm just going to leave it if true. Doesn't matter right now. So we want to make a manifest file, which is, I've took this idea from essentially how they use, or how they build browser extensions, but we're going to basically make a JSON. So if you don't know what a JSON is, it looks essentially like this loader, except you probably wouldn't have this function. You'd have just more pure data kind of things. And essentially what this core loader is going to do is it's going to contain all the files. I'm going to have it in an array, and I need to open up the in the game client this index.html, and we just want to see all these scripts have been added. We want to make this so we can adjust it on the fly essentially, and we can wait until, obviously we can look at the requests, we can implement all the data as it comes in. So it sets up the index to all the files that we're going to store here. So all these files will be loaded as they are here, and then we're going to be able to access all the information immediately straight after it, so we don't need to do all this waiting for the window to load and whatnot. And we want to keep, we're going to get rid of this, but before we do that we want to get this post call, and we've got to put it in the loader, and instead of putting it load, we want to match it with the core load. So obviously if you don't understand what this is doing, you've got to refer back to the first video where I tried to explain all the API that I built, the API I built for and the system that I built to actually handle all the transferring of information from the client to the server and from the server back to the client. So we're not going to send any information over, so I could essentially just send it, no, I'll just send it a blank object. Essentially if the server receives this information and sends back information, it will return it in the form of this message. So we can keep this for a little while just to make sure everything that is being requested is actually sent back. So I did want to go to the index.html and get this core. Really, I want all of them. And I'll just make a quick macro. And essentially, I'm just going to go and stop and play it all. So that just repeats every button that I pressed after I press record. It records every button that I press on the keyboard and every click on the mouse. And because everything that was a preset size on the script, because it said script source this, and every single one of them had it, they would all be the same button presses every time. So I just recorded doing it once, and then I just pressed play as many times as I needed to, and I got all the data back. That's just a little handy shortcut if nobody's ever used it before. So if I just press play, and it gets rid of it. And we can just grab all these. And obviously some of these aren't going to be inside this manifest. It's going to be core.manifest or something like that. I'll just pick a name at the moment that we have to. So interface, we can get rid of all these won't actually be in because these are controllers, but I'm going to keep them in for now. Just because we know everything works with them. And they should be all the files. And we're going to put this in game data, and then we're going to just call it manifest core. We'll call it core.manifest. Core manifest dot JSON, not JS, which means it should be on JSON. And that should be fine. And now all we need to do is, well, one of the things I'm going to do first is I'm going to keep this server call available because we need to use that before we can actually receive any of this information. So I'm going to keep that there first, and we're just going to comment out all these script calls. So if we have the server running and we try to run it now, it doesn't exist. Nothing runs at all. It's just blank because all our information that we was doing for the engine is stored here, and now it doesn't. Now it's not. Right. So what we need to look at is the file operator for the node utilities, which I think I've already explained some of this, but it's already up here in the file op. So file op dot, now that one's file read buffer, which I guess we could do it that way, but that directory exists. You can just do file exists first, and it's just lowercase. File exists, and then we can put in core manifest .js, JSON. And this should return true or false. Looking at, yeah. So on the server, I'm going to check if it exists, but this won't exist because we're looking at the wrong folder, because it would look at the service level. So if we look at the game client, core.manifest, the game server, core.manifest, if it exists, and if it does not, we're just going to send it back and empty. And we can, oh, right. could throw back an error with the words no core manifest file found. And I'm actually just going to put core here first, because it's in the core folder. It's not just in the game client, it's in the game client. No, it's in game data. Good thing I checked. So core manifest, and it should do all the core information. Or should I put the manifest in the choices? Let's just put it in the core folder. That way you don't have to worry about if you ever have to copy it, you don't have to worry about what's in game data when you copy it. Now we just want to return the data that exists in the core manifest, which would be file read. It's a different version of read, and that should just give us the entire file read. File.read, and obviously it's going to be the exact same file. Now hopefully it's just the one string. Yeah, file name and file name, right. So when it gets to back to the client, when the client asks for it, which we need to make sure the loader exists always, so we didn't do this anyway, so it does need to actually exist on the system itself. So this would be core slash loader.js, so that can exist. Then when Windows loaded, load, I'm just going to copy it from the core window unloader because function. I'm going to not have this at the moment. So when this event's called, we want to actually do the loader.core load. I just want to call it, and hopefully all this should just activate, and it should send the message core load now message, but it should request the post core load to fire, which should then go to the game server, and it should fire this event, which should then just return all the data inside that file. And as this is just messaging, printing what's been messaged, it should just print out to the console. So now let's load it, and this won't work at the moment anyway because we need to reboot the game, because every time you edit the main file or the server file, it's going to need to be rebooted because it's always running the it takes a copy of what when it's launched, so it can run it, but it can't update it even though you've updated the files without actually relaunching. There might be a way to do it, but I am unfamiliar with it. So loader 14 error. Right, so apparently there's an error with the loader. Let's just check. Nothing seems to go wrong with the main file. So I want to make sure the game server is running, yes, and messaging.add event should exist. Turns out if the file does exist, if it doesn't, it should return error. Okay, so I'm going to put data, because we're going to send it back as a JSON anyway, so server undefined. Okay. File read game client. Let's try print outcome equal to this and then sending back the outcome instead. That was probably my mistake. So did not run file exist. So it's some stupid thing that I forgot to do at some point, but for some reason it's only ever came a problem today. So I'm a little annoyed because in the several programs that I've used, I built a whole service software version control system on top of this, and that's never came into play, even though I'm pretty sure I've called this multiple times. I've even called it here, and that's never became an issue at all. But now at least it's fixed, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. Message from servers received, but now we have not done anything with the data in that file, and we want to make a, well, I'm going to make a div /div. Maybe there's a better element to use for this, but and I'm going to call it id equals script container so save that, and in the loader I just want to get a reference to the script container and it's an ID, so we put the octathorpe at the start. We just want to make a let contain equal this first, and because we get everything back from this, we want to get, I'm going to change this from messages to data again. I could probably just send it back as a raw file, but I don't care. So contain let scripts equal an array, an empty array. We can go for and this res let data equal res.data, and we're going to just go and do a JSON dot parse, and that should rip all the JSON data out of the it should convert it from a string to an actual object, which we can now use. So let I equals 0, I is less than data dot file. Let's have a look at what I stored in game client, which is game core. Just edit it. So it should just be files as capital F. Files dot length, because it's still an array. We now want to go through all of these, and we want scripts dot push. We can actually let script object, so that's a script object, equals document create element. We're just going to put script in here. And we're going to push this to, we're not going to push it at all. No, I'm going to use this. I'm just going to go contain dot append copy append element. I'm pretty sure it's just append, but I can check it in here. Append child. And before we actually append it, we want to actually do set attribute src script, and we want to just put the script name, which is going to be the files, data files .i, and now when we run this, uncaught not identified, not valid JSON. Could be that the transfer actually already converted it to JSON for us, so we might get away with this. And we might want to just put it in console.log res, which just stands for result. Okay, it's still using message, so I might not have changed it. Loader. So it would have been right. So it would have been json.parse. I thought we was going to get to the scene loader today, but it might look like it's going to be to the next episode. That should parse all the data. Now we just need to reset the server. Launch. So what does it mean by this? One of those, I'm just going to test it. So I'm going to do json.parse, and I'm going to put these I'm going to just cut it down to 2 of them. just for testing purposes, and once this is done, might want to get rid of the brackets. Should be fine because it should read it anyway. No. That equal JSON. I'm just testing here whether what it actually looks like when it's actually parsed. So fortunately I know the reverse of the JSON, so I can have a look at how it's actually presented. So I think it's just getting mad that the files wasn't in quotations or the speech marks. Unexpected user interface is not defined, which seems like a good thing at the moment. So we can see it's loaded all the scripts in, and it's not invoked any of them. Well, it's invoked some of them, so 48. You've got to be careful because it might involve race conditions. So text. If I get the same outcome again, right. So it seems that launch is okay now. For some reason it did that. It's not funny at the start. So we can just test it to see if it's actually loaded everything in, which it has done, and it's got all the frame rates. So now we've got the core manifest actually loading in. We can now go to this load. So once it's done this, we want it to do scene load scene, and we're going to put this as a function. We're going to have load base data as well. Yeah, so we've got it loading from one file, but it's not going to activate anything right now because we need to open the core, which it's already open. This temporary setup is not actually getting, none of this is actually getting invoked because the event is not called when this is actually being written to, because it's already activated this event before we set the function to the event or add the function to the event. So none of this can run. That's not a bad thing because this needs to actually be core.base. Or core.launch, and what we can do is once everything has been handed to the system, we can just do a base.launch, and that will just fire everything up. split it to. Okay, so we need to put commas after these just because then core is not defined. So okay, so core.launch can't activate here. What we might have to do is, in one of the core files, we might have to do core.launch as a last response or something. Which means we're just going to have a core.launch as a launch.js. So must be last file loaded. Which nothing will actually load it now. So let's just quickly make it load it just for a test to test it. And let's go. Control 2 is not defined. And now we've got everything running and it's launching from the, still running from the core, but now it's actually taking all the script data is actually located in this core manifest file now, rather than being listed out in the index. So if you got rid of this, it'd be perfectly fine. Now there is a problem with this because we need the scene to launch all of this and then we need it to do this. So how are we going to do this? Because I'm just making this up as I go along. So what we might want to do is put this base data last, so it's always being called last. Load base data, and we might add something in here to do custom loads. So for non-core elements, we can actually put into the core data file here. So this is essentially going to be like the engine and your code, or the game code. So you can use the game engine over and over, you just got to change the game code, the game data. And let's just, because we've got nothing in there at the moment, we need to make a folder called scene or scenes, and we're going to make a scene. We're going to call this defaults. I'm just going to save it as default JSON. We're going to put it in the scenes folder. You can probably guess where this is going. So in the core, we want to get rid of this temporary setup. This is just absolutely terrible. And we want to look at how this is going to influence how this is going to be designed. So we want to look at so first of all we want to split it up into layers. Make sure it's in quotations and has a colon at the end. So you'll get 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. And then inside the layers we want to have actors, inside a block we want to call this actor, actors. Which is going to have another list, and inside this actors list we want to have another block which is going to be called it is properties. Which is going to be an array of different bits of data, and then we want to do this for user interface. It's going to be blocking out what all this is going to do. So this should look pretty simple right now, so I don't want to add anything inside there for them. Just got to try and think of how actors, there is no actor. So we've got a layer, but we have no actors in the layer, which is how this one's supposed to be. So there will be nothing inside it. And the same will be done for the next one. So I'm just trying to, this is going to be easier to build once we have an editor, because this is going to, the editor is going to manage all this structuring for us. So in this case, properties, you want to call it type. Let's put it as a and for this one we might use rect just to make sure render rect, and for this one we might just use a, oh no, that wouldn't be a property anyway, it would be control 1 or something like that, so underscore control. Even though this is going to be removed, we can keep it in here for now. And the user interface would be the render. Rectangle. And just because 0, that's on layer 2, this is on layer 3, which is the one where we had the button, so we might as well put this one back in. Could do, I'll just do it now. So we have one actor which is going to be Control 2, and this time I'm going to put just a button, render button. So it's going to look slightly neater than what we had before. So that file launch that we need right now, it's loader. So the loader so this should be looping on everything. Don't need it in the core. So the core manifest, we want to also put in the type of starting scene, and we can just call it default. And that's because this JSON file is called default. So now, when we pull all this stuff into the loader, we want it to load scene, and we're going to put the name of the scene in, name, and we just want to put loader, load scene, because this should be alright. Now we can get the data, or is it going to be res? No, it's data. Data and starting scene. And that should give us the name, so we can just console.log the name. And they should all work now without it. So it's sent the default, so this is the time, isn't it? That's fair. So, you know what we've got to do now is actually load the scene. So I'm just going to take a copy of this and go just load scene. We don't have to care too much on all this because it's going to go to game data. Oh no, stop, game client. Game data, and then whatever the scene name is. So message dot scene name, and we're just going to return all that information again. We'll just use the same thing, but no scene name. Is just going to be the error message. So the data, we need to go file.read, and I'm going to read this file. Just need the insides of this. And in the loader. Let's just take a copy of this post. And scene load, which is going to be the game load scene. It's important that these two are the same. Load scene, so data is going to be sent over. So this one needs an actual message, which was, let's just put them both together. So okay. Should have done this at the start, but we'll put them both together so we got the actual names. Scene name, and it's just got to be this name. So we don't need to console log it now. So that should be sent over to the game server, and if you wanted to, you could also put console.log loading scene just so it looks, you can read the console just to see what it's doing. And we don't need to do all this. We don't need the container because we're not using it. We don't want to load the base, which I might change the name of, but we'll continue on. Now data load scene not been assigned because as I said, it takes a copy of the actual code that's running and keeps running it even though you change it. It's running the copy. So let's just try that again. Scene.down undefined is not a valid JSON. So loader 49. Undefined is not a valid JSON, which could only mean, well, could mean a few things. The game server itself, loading scene default, it has not found it. Because scenes slash scenes, because we've got to look in the scenes folder. At some point I will get the hang of the organization that I've used. So that, although this is terrible, it's actually a good thing because we know it's loading the right thing. So what it's mad at, one thing it's mad at is there is no commas after the actors. And I think that might just be it. It might also be mad that this exists, so I'm just going to copy this and put it into another file. And I'm going to save this. And I'm just going to launch it again. We don't need to launch the server because nothing's changing the server. After valid JSON and 23 from loader 49. So that's the same loader. So we could just console.log data just to make sure everything's being sent over that should be sent over. Cannot access data before initialization. 49, whatever that means. Oh, that's because it's res data. Unexpected comma or after 23. So 23 would probably refer to the default file. So if we go down to line 23, we've got colons, which is not what's supposed to be in a JSON file. It's probably what it's on matter. And line 26, it says something that's unexpected at line 26, and that's because there's no comma after the properties and there's no comma after the properties. And now that's just printing, and we've got full access to all this information. And now, just to make life a little easier, I want to go back to the loader and move this from here to here, and instead of putting res data, I'm just going to call it res. Just going to call it data. So now we get a copy of the actual object that we're using. So we can see how it's all structured, and we can check everything's in here. Properties exists, and user interface exists. That's good. And what we need to do now is we need to use this data to create a scene, or the scene rather. And I don't actually want this to happen in here. I would rather have this happen, at least for the first part. So I can't guarantee everything's loaded here. I'll put it here, and this is going to complicate a lot of things. So yeah, some of this stuff's going to be interesting. Because not everything's going to, as soon as this is run, doesn't mean the script is going to be loaded. And that's the confusing part, because when I'm loading the scene function might actually not exist at this point, which is why I wanted to have this load base data, which loads it at the end, which means then I can grab all this information here. And that's completely confused everything. The only other thing I can think of is to put a core here and have the scene name stored here before anything gets launched. Which is something that I'm considering doing. It's going to need the cursor setup. It needs to be done before it launches, but we don't need to necessarily launch it before the scene is actually set up. So we can put scene name equals, I'm going to call it nothing, just to make sure something is actually being written to it. And index, we're just going to clone this, and I'm going to go call it core.core.js. And I'm going to put this before everything. So this file should get stored. We need to get rid of, from the core manifest, we get rid of the core. We don't need two cursors. Now all I've got to do is go install the, when it loads, instead of storing it here, we go core.scene name. On this load base data. No. what happens when that file its final launch? It was core.launch. And we can just go in here and go loader.load scene, and we can just put the scene name. Okay, so this information is stored over there. That should be firing up the launcher when that's finished. And it's finished, it should launch the load scene with the name, and hopefully that should all be working now. Loading scene default, okay. And we have the scene here and it's loaded. So now it's loaded, I need to make sure that when the scene we can get like completely gut the scene information, which means I need to actually add something to the scene file because it's set up as layers, and then add actors to the layer. So we're going to go this dot full clean or something, deep clean, or delete scene equals function. Now you're going to just look at any information that's stored up here. So this dot layers is going to return to nothing, and then we can do the scene dot setup, which is going to check that's what we do in the layer. So now let's cursor scene dot equals no scene dot setup. Actually, we can just use instead of doing the delete scene, we could just tick that. After all, that is what needs to be in here, essentially. Core scene equals no scene, scene dot change resolution set up. So now nothing should be in the scene, and we should be able to access all the data. So for let lay equals 0, lay is less than data dot layers dot length I++. So when it goes through this, it should go for all the layers. Choose a capital L. Then we can go for all the act in acts layer dot I, or lay is lay plus plus. So act and actors dot length. Then inside this we can finally just go through the properties, and we can go prop in actors dot act dot properties dot prop properties dot length, and we do prop and finally got properties. So now all of this has been set up. We can access the properties at any given point. We can even go let property equals dot prop and user int equals user interface dot UI. So now in that area we've got all the enclosed data within this array. All this object, so we can go and check for the type, if the type exists. Property type, and that's how we're going to access the underscore control. It's just going to be the name. So now we need to create the function reference from the name. I can't remember how to do that right now. So I'm going to do some very bad coding. And I'm just going to do new plus property type, and I'm just going to go eval which is going to basically just convert this into code. And I'm just going to store this as a let p. Then we can do the same thing for the user interface. User interface here. And we can call that u. Now I might change the way this works slightly later on. But now we've got to go through scene dot actor core.scene dot layers dot lay dot actors dot push new actor, and that's done this level. We can actually call it a let actor equal new. Actor ref equal new actor. And this actor ref can just be replaced into here. Now we can just use this reference in later things, so we can go add, we go to whatever this was saying, add property. We can just put in the copy, and I think it's just add UI, and we can just put U. I forgot to do this properly, so for now, hopefully that will just suffice. Cannot read uniform content. Draw GUI. Okay, let's just have a look at the scene. Core.scene. Layers to dot actors. There is an actor in there, and it has a property. Okay. Can have a look at what's in it. And from what it looks like, it's got all the information in there. So why is it not liking it? Because it looks like this property control was using the, I haven't got it in here at the moment, properties control. I want to say it was using this, but so far it's not actually being called, so it shouldn't throw an error. Cannot read properties of undefined reading context. 13. Check the input has actually been created. Has render rectangle. I thought it was in the controller, but it's render rectangle. So I'm obviously not reading. On line 13, layers.context. So somehow when I've added it, well, hold on. Is it when I did this? I went scene.add actor. Add actor till layer. That's what I needed to use, not the whatever I used. And it should be in here. Actor reference, and it should be on lay. Now let's reboot this. And now everything is back, and we have a way of using a scene. I'm actually surprised that this eval works, but it does. So thankfully it's actually a good thing. Now we can actually put whatever we want in here. So one thing you're probably going to notice that we can't do right now is where is it? So color fill. We haven't got a way of actually putting this into the object yet, but that is what's going to come next with serialization, and that's going to be included with the editor. And I'm pretty happy with this so far. So now that's going to be the end of today's episode.